As we exited the shuttle, we stepped onto soil, or at least the long-dead remains of soil, cracked and scarred from the dry, covered in deep scrapes where kraken must have passed. Ground was firm underfoot, and the looming shadow of the escort now closing in to the light. The first part we saw was a tentacle, sweeping out of the darkness and landing not 4 meters from us. Soon 5 or so others joined the first, each as thick as a tree trunk, covered in twisted metal plating and oily residue. Moments later, the vast bulk of its body loomed over even me, perhaps as large as the shuttle itself. As before, we could discern no mouth, eyes, or features at all beyond its ragged and pitted plating. As it came to a stop, its body settled on coiling tentacles, though it did not stop moving entirely, the suggestion of tentacles writhing in the dark and its body undulating. Not unlike breathing, though more sinister, the action of undulation made its plates scrape against one another. Sharp metal fragments that protruded from it seemed to chomp endlessly, as though its skin were hungry. Even with my hearing turned down, I knew it was far too loud to communicate verbally, so I opened a channel in hopes of a reply. As I expected, the kraken accepted the connection, and once again my senses were under assault. The din of the city and strange imagery flowed directly down the link, causing me to stagger again, though Hayden was at my side instantly, preventing me from falling. Within the din, a chorus of wails, as though jet engines were being strangled together, the sounds forming words in a tortured version of Spanish, my native tongue.
My matriarch awaits.
The sound of it echoed again and again before the connection was terminated, and the great bulk of this monster began to turn, expecting us to follow. Though my head was now pounding from the onslaught, I was able to start walking, half staggering at first, though Hayden and Lola flanked me, ensuring I did not lose my footing. The escort was not especially fleet, moving slower than I feel comfortable walking, though the rugged ground and smoke-filled dark were enough to make me glad. It would be easy to get lost in this foreboding place. Only a few minutes of walking caused the ground to change in appearance twice, first the soil ending at the jagged plating of a metal floor, no less scarred and pitted than the soil had been. Shortly after, we crossed a stretch of ground that was disturbingly like the ribs on the city's exterior, the faint undulations within confirming my suspicions. The strip of recumbent kraken seemed to be indifferent about being used as a floor, and soon was behind us. The original, though decimated flooring, returned beneath my feet, as had my grace. Walking calmly once more, my software support system pushing away the headache and tuning my senses as we walked. Soon, a wall showing the fronts of long abandoned stores was beside us. We were entering the streets of this once beautiful city, though now it was a wasteland of torn and battered structures. The procession of ruined streets, rivers of sleeping kraken, and the unbroken dark continued. Nothing was generating light but the 3 of us, occasionally illuminating a kraken in motion, many smaller than the escort, a few larger, though all equally as disturbing in their appearance and movement. When the city had begun to sink some 8 centuries ago, it had been evacuated, and the kraken of Venus had salvaged the abandoned city. I was glad that the people had evacuated. If they had died here, I was sure the bones would still litter the streets. Instead, the melted remains of plastic decorations bubbled in the heat of the air. The odour of it was strong, even with my senses dialed down. We walked for 4 hours through this scene, turning from one ruined street to the next, no word from the escort, and no idea where we were. When we finally seemed to approach our destination, the streets had opened up, leaving us without walls as a guide, the floor changing from the original plating to the undulating floor of the Kraken at rest. Before us was a great pile, coils of Kraken plating of an indistinct number of the beasts, moulded in a manner to form a structure with a single large opening. The escort came to rest at the edge of the entrance, without a sign of guidance, so I swallowed a deep breath of the noxious air and carefully walked through the doorway. Lola and Hayden had fallen back slightly, but followed me into the undulating chamber. The interior was the same as the exterior, the walls, floor, and ceiling all composed of Kraken. How many I could not tell, but certainly hundreds. The chamber was large, but not so large that our combined light could not reach the walls, glinting off the oily surfaces of the masses. As I reached the centre of the chamber, the undulation quickened for a moment, before the floor beneath me became entirely still. The sudden change caused me to stop my advance, taking stock of my surroundings, and hoping they had no wish for war. From the dulled sounds within the room there came a sudden change, the din dying off a little and providing a sense of momentary relief. But then came the voice. No sign of feminine intonation, not that I was expecting any. It was not like the escorts had been. It was a screech, such a high pitch as to cut its way through the background cacophony, carving into my ears and those of my aides. Lola's ears were especially sensitive, her canine heritage blessing her with a keen hearing, but the screech caused her to let out a squeal of pain. Hayden and I fared a little better, but not by a large margin. Staggering was becoming a common theme for us, Lola even losing her footing and tumbling to the floor, such as it was.
Greetings, Odell, ambassadors of the UNS.
The voice tortured my native language into intelligible sounds, echoing around the room several times before fading. As soon as the voice had faded enough, Lola made her escape from the chamber, so I indicated for Hayden to go after her to ensure she was going to be okay.
Greetings, matriarch. It's,
I trailed off for a moment, conscious of the fact that my next words were about to be a lie, so I fell silent, hoping she would respond and ignore my stumble. She did.
What does the UNS want of the Kraken?
Once the echoes had faded again, I tried to restore my composure somewhat, and began with a well-rehearsed and planned offer of membership. The UNS was willing to offer a generous treaty with the Kraken, good trade deals, and plenty of equality, though my short time here had already given me doubts. The matriarch remained silent as I spoke, listening intently, I hope. It was difficult to know anything about her reactions. After some 20 minutes of speaking, I fell silent in hopes of some response from the unnerving voice.
We will consider. Wait for our reply.
Returned her voice after a short but significant pause. Thanking her for the time, I backed out of the chamber and looked for my assistants. They were not to be seen, even the light of their suits was gone, as was the escort, hopefully taking them back to the shuttle. Checking and overlaying my mapped walk here, I began the return journey, walking back to the edge of this space and on to the streets I had passed earlier. I was able to make a brisk pace alone, easily outstripping the escort and his charges, though I had walked no more than 10 minutes before I came to an impasse. Where once a path of Kraken lay sleeping, there was now a gaping chasm, the depth of which I could not say, but the gap was certainly too wide to jump. Left with little choice, I began to walk along this chasm, hoping a route over it would come. After a few minutes, I found such a route, though it required me to climb to an upper walk where a once beautiful bridge still remained. With care, I climbed the jagged remains of the wall and hoisted myself onto the walk before heading for the bridge. After crossing the bridge, I intended to turn right and find my way back to the path, but to my left I could see a faint sign of light, the suit lights of Hayden or Lola. So I jogged toward the source of light, but it reacted to my approach, moving into darkness. As I arrived at the site where it shone, I could see no sign of the source, but a kraken was settled next to where it had been. I opened a channel for the kraken, but received no reply, so I turned around and headed back for the path, though it was not so simple to reach it again. I needed to climb, jump, and even crawl through detours, with no further sign of the lights, Hayden, or Lola.